Right, hello everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to this WebEx. The purpose of the WebEx is to talk to you about final assessment. Just to go back and cover why do we do a final assessment, and then talk about the process for the final assessment coming up for you. So I'm going to give you a bit of background, and then I'm going to hand over to Juliet, who's going to talk through the specifics of the process. Okay, so why do we hold a final assessment? There are really two main objectives. The first is to assess that you are ready to take on a senior associate role. And as you've gone throughout the foundation for each of the programme, we've had a very strong focus on feedback and performance management. And we have been, during the time, you will have had your learning logs, you've had the level 1 core consulting curriculum. That is what we're going to assess you against, and the global core competencies for a senior associate. So in the final assessment, we are looking for evidence that you are ready to perform at a senior associate level, and therefore you'll be able to graduate from the Foundation for the Future programme and go out and join the competencies and perform as a highly performing senior associate. We need to do that so that we are really fulfilling our commitment to the business, that we are bringing people into the business who have the right level of skills and can perform at the right level. So that's why we're doing the final assessment. The second objective is then actually for yourselves to provide you with an experience of rigorous performance management. I mean, you will have been through the Foundation for the Future programme, you've been through your quarterly learning cycles. We go right back to induction at Latimer and when the performance assessment process started for you there. So this is the next stage in that performance management. And what you'll get out of the final assessment will be some detailed feedback on what you did well in final assessment and what you performed at strongly, and then also the development areas. And everybody will get those because that's really valuable for you going forward as you go forward to be successful senior associates. Okay, so your assessment and the next steps. How is this going to work? Final assessment runs over 1 day. And really there are 3 elements to the final assessment, and Juliet's going to cover those in detail with you. There is a case study. The case study is based around a client, a synopsis of a client type problem, and then the case study is really trying to get you to act the role of a senior associate in a simulation of a client, of what we all do every day with a client. So the actual situation and what you're asked to do really shouldn't feel unfamiliar to you. What we're trying to do is to simulate the type of client work and what would be expected of you as a senior associate so we can see how you perform. So during that 1 day, the major part of the day will be spent on the client case study, which you'll be doing as part of a team. During that day, you will also have a learning interview, and you will also be asked to produce a piece of written output that will be related to the case study. And what we're looking to do there is to test your ability to communicate through written means as well as through verbal means, because the verbal means will be tested both through the case study and the learning interview. But it's really important that we understand what your ability to communicate through written media as well, which is why you also do that written exercise. You will all receive, once we've done this WebEx, we will then send out confirmed diary dates for each of you. So the 1 day assessments will take part during the week commencing on the 13th of May. So you will all get an invitation. So you will each do 1 day during that week. The other next step, the important next step for you of what's going to come, so you will be getting the dates for your final assessment. And Juliet will be talking to you about what you need to prepare. Over the next few weeks as well, we're also going to ask you for your competency choices. So as you go through final assessment and you graduate and you become a senior associate, you move out of the Foundation for the Future competency and you join one of the other competencies. So whether it's finance or operations or technology or risk, you will go into one of the competencies. You have the opportunity to put a preference for your competency choice. Now, we have made some enhancements to that process, and we're going to talk you through what those enhancements are during this WebEx. So that's a really important part of this WebEx as well. So what can you expect over the next few weeks is, firstly, you'll get the date that you're going to take part in the final assessment and you need to start preparing, and secondly, you'll be asked for your competency choices. Julia is going to talk you through that timeline, your pathway to promotion, in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so as Isabel has started telling you about, there's a lot of things that are going to happen in the next few weeks and months. We're kicking off today with this briefing, which is just to let you know everything that's going to happen, so there's no surprises. You'll be going through your performance review March, April, in line with the firm. We'd like you to submit your CV to me by the 7th of May, and that's your internal CV, which will be shared with your interviewers. On the 10th of May, we've got competency choices to be sent to Lindsay, and as Isabel mentioned, there'll be more information given around those choices. Then we've got the final assessment the week of the 13th, and we've got Tell Day on the 30th of May. And this has actually been brought forward because the firm now can split reward and rating conversations, so you don't have to wait as long, which I hope is a good thing for you. Later on in June, we've got the reward conversations, and that will be taking place with your group leaders. Then for those who are promoted from the 1st of July, that's when the actual promotion happens, and then you transition to your new competency on the 1st of August, and that happens. You'll also get a nice transition event which will help you prepare for that. So what will actually happen at final assessment? There's a case study, as we mentioned. You'll be in a small group of associates, and there'll be 2 assessors in the room with you who will be observing you for the duration of the case study. Your group will make a presentation to a director, and you'll have access to the internet and to PwC resources for the whole time. We'll collect your slides in as well at the end of the presentation. Now, probably something to put your mind at rest. We'll ask you if you have any conflicts with any of the assessors that are on our list. So, for example, if you've worked for a long period with someone, then it's probably not appropriate for them to be assessing you. So you just need to let us know, and then we'll make sure that that sort of situation doesn't happen. As Isabel mentioned, there's a learning interview, and that's one-on-one with your assessor, and that's where people will be looking at your CV, so that's the reason that we're asking for that. That interview, you'll be talking about your learning over the whole time on the foundation programme, as well as perhaps what you've learnt from the assessment day. Then, as mentioned, there's a written exercise. This is you working independently, and it's a written output related to the case study. So, just not an exam. We're not going to give you an academic subject to write an essay about. We're looking at your business communication. Also, it's not a memory test, so you can take in with you the information that you have created in your case study. So hopefully that sort of shows that it's business communication rather than what you can remember and who you remember the most.
We've got a question come in about whether the timelines Juliet was talking to are relevant to those on an international secondment. Now we have the members of the team who are out in the US, in New York. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the timelines are the same for the guys that are in the US. You are going to be assessed in the US, and that will be by people who are on secondment with you, so UK staff who are working in the US and have experience of the foundation programme.
So the timelines are similar. The exact date of that final assessment for those of you who are in New York, it will be very close to that week. Whether it's exactly during that week, we're not entirely sure. We need to fit around your diaries and the diaries of the contact assessors. But as Juliet says, we're lucky because there are a number of people who are out from the UK, senior consultants who are out on secondment as well with you, and they've actually taken part in final assessments before. So we were kind of hoping for our trip to New York, and sadly, looks like there's a more efficient way of doing it. So the timelines are the same. It's just your final assessment will be in the US.
Yeah, and then I've had another question about the CV, what length of CV. There's no sort of prescribed length for the CV. I think as long as you've got the information on there that you want to share, we're not going to sort of be strict about if it has to be 1 page or 2. I would say don't go over 2 sides, but 1 side or 2 sides, however it works for you and however you want to get that information across. So looking at the marking criteria, the ratings from your most recent moderation will be taken into account. So everyone who's 1, 2 or 3 rated in the last moderation can pass the final assessment. Those who are 4 rated, they're not able to pass the assessment, but they'll go through and do the process so that they can get the feedback, which should help develop for the next time round. You're assessed by people that work in PwC, so there's no one external that's coming in. Assessors are not told in advance about your length of tenure in foundation or what your current rating is.
So they will not know. I mean, there are a number of people who will be going through final assessment for the second time, and the assessors won't know whether you're going through first or second time.
As we've mentioned, there's not a forced distribution. So everyone 1 to 2 rated can pass the assessment, and we'd really like you to, and the competencies would really like you to as well.
Yeah, if we had everybody going through final assessment passing, that would be fantastic. That would be a great success.
One final point about this is if you have any extenuating circumstances on the day, you need to let someone know before you take the assessment. There's really nothing we can do after it's sort of happened. If you suddenly think I wasn't performing my best because of this reason, you need to let us know before you actually do anything. Okay.
Just another couple of questions that have come through. A useful point that one of the people managers has made. Just to emphasise, the CV is used to give information, background information to your assessor, and also to help them prepare for the learning interview. We are not assessing the quality of your CV. It is so please, we want it to be of high quality, but it is the quality of your CV is not part of the assessment. It is background information to help the assessor get to know you and to help them with their planning. There was a question about, does the CV need to have the client names removed? To be honest, it's being used internally. If it's got client names in it, that's fine, but don't go and edit it and start putting them back in and create a lot of work. The purpose of the CV is just to give some background information and help people prepare.
And a question about how long is the group case study? And so that normally is the sort of the bulk of the assessment day. So you'll be doing that for several hours in your group. Now, thinking about how to prepare, think about how you create high-performing teams quickly. So I think, as we've just said, you'll be in your case study group for quite a long time. So it's vital that you work together as a group and you perform well together. Also think about how you can research and digest a lot of information about a company and how that you would structure client PowerPoint decks. Make sure you think about everything that you've learned since you've joined the programme and how you've applied yourself to learning, and that will be especially useful for your learning interviews. Again, think about what you're interested in and how you can develop. I think your interviewers are really interested in learning about you as a whole. One thing that I can't emphasise enough is to review the GCSEs for senior associates. This is what you're marked against throughout the whole day. So there's no sort of secret criteria that we're looking at. Everything's done on the GCSEs. So really sort of take the time to understand them and think about how you can demonstrate that you've met those. We're assessing how you approach the task as well as the outcomes. So sort of bear that in mind when you're forming your teams and when you're going through the day. Also, if you're preparing to take the assessment for a second time, then include the feedback that you've received previously. Just going through another question here. So The question is, the assessment process has been purposely divided from the main performance management process.
Right, the question is, so the question's been raised saying, the assessment process has obviously been purposely divided from the main performance management process, and it's almost as if we were applying for experienced hires. I'm wondering as to the reason for it, so I'm just explaining the question. Can I just say, it isn't separated from the main performance management process because your performance rating is a feed into the final assessment process. Now, as you go through your careers at PwC and anywhere else, for any promotion exercise, there is some kind of assessment. Now, when you're going to be, when you're being promoted when you go from senior associate to consultant, you'll have to put together a business case. When you're going and you'll have to do an interview as well. When you're going from consultant to senior consultant, you have to put together a business case and you will be interviewed. When you go up to director from senior consultant, you have to do an assessment centre. And for partners, you have to do assessment centres in your business unit, and then you have firm-wide interviews. So this is no different to any other process you will go through in terms of promotion at PwC and actually at most other large organisations. So this is attached. You're not applying for a new job. We are assessing you to make a judgment as to whether you meet the criteria to meet the global core competencies for the next grade up. That will happen every time you go through a promotion process.
Okay. Now, Tell Day. So, as we mentioned in the pathway, that's been brought forward. So, I hope that you guys are pleased that you won't have to wait quite as long to find out the answer. Your outcome will be communicated by a member of the leadership team, and your people manager will be there too. This meeting will also be where you find out what competency you're going to be in and what rating you've got for coming out of moderation. And then your reward conversation will happen later on with the group leader. Associates that don't pass the final assessment spend another 6 months in foundation and will then go through the final assessment in November. And just to sort of reassure you, the leadership team do due diligence on all of the outcomes, and we go through all of the evidence and sort of make sure that all the recommendations are fair across the group.
Perfect, thanks, Julia. Another question is coming in. Does your performance rating count in any way other than determine whether you can or can't pass if you do or don't have a 4? So the performance rating feeds into the final assessment in that if you have a 4, if you are a 4-rated individual, by default you can't pass into be a senior associate because you're not performing at the level. A 4 rating means you're not performing at the expected level for an associate. Therefore, we cannot promote you because you're not performing at an associate level, let alone being promoted. It then, whether you are a 1, 2, or 3, then doesn't affect your final assessment. You still have to go through final assessment, and you all then have the opportunity. You're all being assessed against the global core competencies for a senior associate. One thing I just make clear here is the difference. They're complementary, but the difference between the performance rating process and assessing you whether you're ready for a promotion. When we are assessing your performance, we are assessing you as an associate. And this is the same through any promotion process at PwC. You'll have a performance assessment that looks at your performance in that grade. The promotion process then considers whether you are ready to perform at the next level of grade. It is possible that you might be high performing at one grade, but there might be a development area that means you don't get promoted to the next grade, even though you are high performing. So just because you are 1 rated at one level within the firm does not mean by default that you are ready to be promoted to the next level. So that I think that's really important that that's clear.
Great. Okay, so we can just pause to see if there's any more questions come in before we move on to the next section.
Okay, just before we go to the next session, there's another question come in. Oh, sorry, and I understand some of you can't hear us. I think it might be because we're moving away from the phone. So if you can't hear us, please, we've got some red crosses, but do some red crosses if you're having problems hearing us. I appreciate the irony of that statement. So the other question that's come in was saying, in previous assessments, there's been a pass-fail for each of the components of the assessment. Is this no longer the case? No, we changed this in the last round through final assessment. So for the group that went through in November, previously we gave people a rating on, used to having to do a different type of business exam, and we actually, that was a more theoretical question. We wanted it to be more complementary to the case study, which is now the assessment of your written communication is related to the case study. So you will be given, whether you have passed or failed final assessment, you will be given feedback from each of the elements of the assessment. So you will know whether you performed strongly or whether there were particular development areas from the case study, the learning interview and the written exercise.
Okay. Are there any more questions before we move on to talk about competency matching? So if you've got something that you think of later, you can still ask us. It's not sort of now or never. Just before we move on, if there's any sort of burning questions, type them up.
Right, we've got one question that's come in saying, what happens if an associate fails final assessment a second time? So basically, if you fail a first time, you will be invited to come back and spend another 6 months in the programme and take final assessment a second time. If you have failed it for a second time, it means that you cannot be promoted to a senior associate, and we have a time limit to how long you can spend in the Foundation for the Future programme. So if you fail for a second time, then there will need to be a discussion about what your future in PwC is. So either you will need to look for something else to do within PwC, or we need to have a discussion about where your future lies. But if you fail for a second time, you can't get promoted to a senior associate, and you cannot stay as an associate in Foundation for the Future.
And we've had another question about the preparation that you can do. So GCSEs and learning, definitely. Is there any revision we should be doing, or is it more on our behaviours? So there's not really any revision that you can do. I'd say make sure you sort of understand how PwC goes to market, but I think that's something that you will have experience in already, and sort of from the work you do on a day-to-day basis, I think that's something that you would have experience of. So really, really do focus on the GCSEs and on your behaviours. And another question, if you don't do as well in one of the assessments, can you still pass the overall assessment? So as we said, it's sort of a holistic assessment over all of the areas. So if you sort of don't do as well in another, but you can demonstrate that you've achieved those competencies in a different part, then you could still pass. So we're looking to see that you've met the competencies, all of the GCSEs. Obviously, if you sort of do terribly in one and then don't really make up for it in any of the other parts, that would look like a fail. Okay, I'm going to move on, and we've got a video to show you about competency matching. So if you can just bear with us whilst we get that sorted.
Right, I just want to say, in terms of watching the video and the competency matches, I think this is really valuable because in terms of, we are always really interested in your feedback on the programme, what worked well and what could be improved. And one of the things we did was ask senior associates who've been through the competency matching process their views on competency matching. And actually we put together a working group and asked some of them to work with us. And Eric, who is a senior associate now and has been through competency matching, has put a huge amount of time he's invested in this and come up with some really innovative ideas and actually helped us to build a model onto how competency matching would be done. So I think this is great because this is an example of you putting back into the programme and helping us to improve on it. And really, in terms of Eric's done a fantastic job with your interests in view in terms of how things could be improved even more. So please watch the video. We'll send a link so you can watch the video about competency matching. Really, the really important points about it is that Eric has built a model using an algorithm that allows us actually, for each of you, you will be able to list the competencies in your preference order as to the competency you want to go into. And the competencies will be able to list individuals who are going through final assessment as to whether they would like you to join the competency. And then the algorithm runs a matching process. And the benefit of doing this is actually what we worried about before is people, whether people were fundamentally, whether they were trying to game the system. So whether they were putting competencies which they thought were going to take less people to give them a better chance to get into some of the other ones. And actually, what this does in terms of the matching process is actually give everyone a fair chance. It doesn't make any difference. There's no point trying to game the system because the algorithm just does it logically. Watch the video. Eric will explain it. I'm really pleased with what Eric's done. And what it does is really run a fair matching process and gives you a much deeper level of granularity in terms of the choices you can specify and allow the competencies to be very specific about who they would like to come into the competency. So we are going to trial this algorithm. We have gone through quite a lot of testing with it. We will run it for this assessment. Please look at the video so you can understand it and come back to us with any questions. Okay, but the aim is to really help with the transparency of that competency matching and give you as much choice as we can. What I would want to emphasise, though, is that one of the points of the Foundation for the Future programme is that, you know, my job in terms of leading Foundation for the Future is that we are preparing some really great consultants for the consulting business. Now, one of the purposes of doing that is that you are very flexible because we don't know what business needs and requirements are going to look like in 2 years' time, in 4 years' time. So we need people who can really move between different competencies and pick things up really quickly. So we are designing this process to give you as much option to make choice as possible. But you do need to bear in mind that the competencies each competency will make a request for how many people it thinks it can take based on a business demand. And so we have to make sure that we are supplying the right sorts of numbers to the competencies. And therefore we can't spend, say, 90 people all to the same competency. So we give you a degree of choice, but not everybody will get their first choice. And the purpose of Foundation for the Future is to be responsive to the business. And actually our expectation is some of you will go into competencies and you might stay there for your whole career. Some of you might go into competencies and after 2 years want to move on and try something else. And all of those are entirely legitimate. We may find in 2 years' time that there's a really big push for a particular type of work that's driven by an industry event and we need to move more people from one competency to another. That happens at all levels in the business. That happens at different industry levels, and partners and directors have to move between different industry sectors depending on the needs of the business. So we've worked really hard. Joe, Julia, Eric have worked really hard on the competency matching, but we just need to remind you it's about being responsive to the business as well. A question's come in saying, will you be told how many places are available in each competency before submitting your competency choices? Yes, you will do. So you will see exactly what the demands from the competencies are, and then that can help influence your choice if that does. But you will have that information before you make your choices. Right, I'm just going to hang on. Oh, another question's coming in. So please, if you have questions on competency matching or anything else we've talked about today, please submit the questions now. I think we'll probably go for maybe another 5 minutes, depending on how many questions come in. Right, I'm just reading. Sorry for the delay. I'm just reading the questions and then translating them back. Right, so there's a question about what would the process be for candidates who's not chosen by any particular competency to join their competency. Basically what happens is that for the competencies in terms of the matching process, if a competency chose to, I'm not sure, I think there are sort of circa 90 of you that will go through final assessment. If a competency chose to, it could list all 90 of you in order. I'm not sure that they're going to do that. What they'll probably do is list somewhere between sort of 10 to 25 of people that they would like to join the competency. anybody out of the 90 of you that's not in that 25, the algorithm then gives an equal rating to. So if you have been through the competency matching and you put your list, you have to rate all of you have the opportunity with the competency matching now to list all of the competencies in the order of preference that you have to which they would go. So therefore you are going to list all of the competencies. There may be a case that you get you end up in a slightly in a competency that's slightly lower down your list. So it might not be one of your top 3, but you will be allocated to one of the competencies because the demand for the competencies, actually we ask them, will match the numbers of people we've got. Sorry, I'm not explaining that very clearly, but it basically means even if you weren't listed in the top 20 of a competency, you will still get matched to a competency. It's just you'll be given an equal rating with other people who weren't specifically named.
There's another question about what would happen if your second choice competency wants you more than your first choice.
Hi everyone, it's Jo. Effectively, the algorithm gives you the best chance or the best match you can possibly get. So say you want to go to finance and finance is your top choice, but operations is your second choice. Now both finance and operations have provided a list of associates that they want, and you appear on both of those lists. Now, this is explained much better in the video, which I do think you should definitely watch because it is bad. Both finance and operations will make you an offer to join their competency. And when I say make you an offer, this all happens in the algorithm. We don't have a lot of offers going backwards and forwards or anything like that. You would join your top choice. So your top choice was finance. Finance wanted to offer you, and that's ultimately where you would end up.
Okay, thanks, Jo. We've got some other questions. Have the competencies already submitted their list? No, they haven't. Their deadline is the same as your deadline, so that's by no means happening now. Another question about what happens if you only have 2 preferences. You need to list all of the competencies in preference order.
If you don't, and you've only put 2 competencies, then it will just assume an equal match for all of the others. So by doing so, you're just risking your chance of ending somewhere that you don't particularly want to go. So there is not if you only put 2, because of the way the algorithm works, there is no benefit to you to only put 2 because it's doing this best offer process anyway. So you're not, by putting only 2 doesn't mean you're going to be guaranteed to get those 2 and you have any better chance than if you've listed the others. So it's just it's not a very sensible thing to do to only list 2 or 3.
And there was a question earlier about whether the numbers are broken down by competency or sub-competency. So obviously some of the larger competencies have a number of sub-competencies. For us in Foundation, the actual competency gets a number of you guys that they're able to get. How they then break it down into their sub-competency is completely up to them. And SMCC is a competency choice, yes.
I'm just waiting for any more questions to come through.
Right, we don't seem to have any more questions, so I would just like to thank all of you for listening. I would like to thank Juliet for doing a really good explanation. Apologies about the video. We need to work out the technology for how we get the sound from videos to come through to you, so sorry about that. Actually, it's about 12 minutes long, so it's probably something to watch at your leisure anyway. Do watch it. It's a really good explanation of a high-performing senior associate, and so please go and watch it. All right, brilliant. Thank you all very much. Good luck with your preparations. We look forward to seeing you in that week for assessment. If you've got more questions, just come and talk to us. Come and talk to anyone in the leadership, your people managers, your group leaders, Juliet, Jo, myself, come and have a chat. But it shouldn't be anything to be worried about. We are assessing you against things that should feel like everyday towards our pieces of client work, and the criteria are very clear. We are judging you against senior associate global core criteria. So good luck, everyone.